Well, we've heard from the Missouri Budget Project. How about from the businessmen and women of Missouri as well? Ray McCarty is the president of Associated Industries of Missouri, and you probably recognize him as AIM sponsors some of the commentaries that we air. Ray, welcome back.
Thanks very much for having me, Mike.
As we talked about with Amy, there may be no lawmakers in the Capitol right now, but that does not mean that there is no work being done to prepare for January. This really is a year-round process now.
It really is, and you know, it's been that way over the last several years that I can remember. It used to be that we would have a downtime between the middle of May and the beginning of the legislative session in January, and that downtime has just disappeared. This year it was the veto session. The governor vetoed a record number of bills, so the veto session was very active, which most of the time it's a yawner. This time it was not a yawner by any means, and so we're spending the time between the end of last session, which really just ended, as you pointed out, to the beginning of next session, trying to listen to our members and see what they want us to pursue in the upcoming legislative session.
And obviously the big debate is going to be over tax policy. In the state of Associated Industries of Missouri, you were involved in writing portions of that, working with the legislature. Let me kind of follow up on something that you have said in the past, and that is you've critiqued the governor on not coming to the table, for lack of a better word, and being involved in the discussions of the tax cut proposal early on in the process, kind of leaving it to an all or nothing thing. What are you hoping changes this year? Because Republicans say they're going to bring back a tax cut of some sort.
I think the bar that we set with the passage of House Bill 253 last year and then the subsequent veto by the governor really raised the level of conversation, and I think now everyone is taking that seriously as an issue that needs to be dealt with. One of the things that happened before the beginning of last session was that Kansas Governor Brownback backed a series of tax cuts in Kansas that directly impacts mainly small and mid-sized businesses, the S corporations, the flow-through entities, which really are the job creators in the economy right now. And Kansas has done away with their state income tax on those types of businesses. And that happened before the beginning of the legislative session. We in the business community took that very seriously because we were very concerned both about state revenues and whether we'll be able to maintain our state revenues, or whether a lot of those businesses will take their tax dollars with them and move to Kansas or other states that have lower tax liability. So we went to work. Actually, a couple of years ago, we had started on trying to do tax reform. And then that really spurred us on last session as we began the session with that hanging over our heads. I think there was a lot of hiding our head in the sand and hope it goes away type attitude coming from a lot of politicians, both local politicians in Kansas City as well as the governor and others. I'm hoping that the education effort that we did since that time has raised awareness of the general public so that they understand this is a real threat. And if we do nothing, if we continue with our tax policy the way it is, we are just asking for those S corporations and those job creators in the economy to move to Kansas, especially if they are in the Kansas City area and it's a very easy move for them.
We talked about this with Amy Bluen just a few minutes ago. The fact of the matter is competition for jobs across state line is a reality, and it's not just border states. A lot of attention has been paid to Texas Governor Rick Perry making a couple visits here. We hate it when states like Texas are trying to attract our businesses. At the same time, we love it when we do it to states like Illinois. What's the proper role of the state government when it comes to trying to attract businesses or trying to encourage current employers in the state to expand, which of course could mean jobs being moved from other states into our state?
You know, with the advent of technology and with transportation systems being the way they are now, we can just erase state borders. In essence, we as a nation are competing with other countries for locations of businesses, as well as amongst ourselves. So we have to make sure that, you know, I think it's important to realize that when a business is looking for a place to locate a new manufacturing facility or a new facility of any kind, they look at the bottom line. They look at how they can recover their costs as quickly as possible and continue to make money, because that's what businesses do. It's not a dirty word to make money. And I think that's one of the things they do. Now, they do look for a qualified, educated workforce. We certainly support that. And we know that we are having difficulty finding qualified people that pursue careers in manufacturing in particular, because they are not thinking about the fact that this is a high-tech environment now and they need some education to get there. But at the same time, we have to be competitive enough to keep those tax dollars flowing by having businesses locate here in the state of Missouri. So we think that we need to have a balanced approach. We're going to bring back a plan next year that is different from the plan we had last year. Many of the components will be the same, but I think we'll look at how we pay for those tax credits, doing them out of the growth in state revenues as we had tried to do with the bill before. I think we'll refine that mechanism a little bit, make sure that we're protecting the funding for the vital services in the state of Missouri at the same time that we're making Missouri a more competitive place to do business.
Well, and that's the argument I think that won out at the end. Whether you agree or disagree with the assertion that education and vital social services would have been affected, I think that there were enough Republican lawmakers that said, we're not going to take a chance. I don't want to have to answer for those accusations in my district come election time. How do lawmakers find that balance to be able to say, we're not going to cut education funding because of a tax cut, we're not going to cut mental health, we're not going to cut roads, we're not going to cut all the things that people depend on if we do a tax cut? Where are the tweaks to be made to kind of alleviate those fears?
Well, we're looking at that now. I think, it was pretty apparent even with the things that we put in the bill. We put some things in the bill because the governor's office had asked for certain things to be in the bill, or asked for certain things to be passed during the legislative session, and we worked them into that bill. We then found out later that there were some flaws with some of that language, and that was really where a lot of the backlash came from. There was an accidental elimination of a prescription drug exemption that was not intended by anybody, but it became a big political football. We're going to eliminate and get back to just the tax cut portion of the bill. That's where we're going to start, and that's where we hope to finish. And so we hope to be able to really look at the components of that. We finished last year with a $339 million surplus that carried over into this current fiscal year. We actually had state revenues that exceeded the previous year by $740 million. That would have paid for the entire tax cut after it was phased in over 10 years. So we're going to look at something to measure state revenues and then use some of the growth in state revenues to help reduce our taxes for the taxpayers that are actually paying the taxes. And that includes, businesses, small businesses that report their taxes on their individual income tax returns. We did not object to the extra benefit for really low income people that was in the bill this last year, and it didn't cost that much money. So we're looking at whether we should include that or not. That would have put an extra $60 in the pockets of people that work and make less than $20,000 a year. They're kind of the ones that always get left behind because they've got a job, they're not on public assistance, but they're still paying very high taxes. So we hope to be able to work some components in that'll be attractive for everyone, including the governor's office. And we've already extended the invitation to the governor's office to work with us as we develop the bill so that we can have something that hopefully he can support when we get to May.
We are visiting with Ray McCarty, the president of Associated Industries of Missouri. Now, Ray, I want to ask you, kind of speaking of those political footballs, and your organization has put out kind of a press release on this recently, is the mechanism in state government where the governor can withhold spending that has been approved by the legislature. What changes do you want to see made to that?
We have to approach that with caution because we have a provision in our Constitution that allows governors to control the rate of spending when revenues are not enough to support the budget that's been passed. You have to have that in order to have a balanced budget, which we have in Missouri. And so we understand that. Unfortunately, in recent years, and not just the few recent years, but over the last couple of decades, that's been something that has turned into more of a political game than it was intended to be. And the legislature will pass a funding item. The governor has the opportunity to veto that. The legislature has the opportunity to override that veto. And then the governor still has the authority to withhold that funding if he wants to. And we saw that happen this last session. There was a technical school that had burned down. There was money put in the budget to rebuild that at $1 million. The governor vetoed that amount. In the veto session, the legislature overrode that veto and said we want that funding to continue. And then the governor withheld the money and still will not spend that money on that purpose. So I think we need to look at some measure of reform, and maybe I think the best approach is probably to have some consensus on when there actually is a revenue shortfall. At the beginning of the budget process, the House House, the Senate, and the governor's office get together and decide what the revenue numbers are going to be that they're going to build the budget around. And that's called the consensus revenue estimate. And I think we could use that same type of process to determine when revenues are falling short, and then allow the governor to do the withholding in accordance with whatever that determination is.
We just have a moment or so left in the program. Do you see 2014 as being just as contentious, or do you see some of these bills being refined to the point where it's a little more streamlined and everybody gets along better politically?
You know, the issues have not gone away, so I think we'll still see a focus on many of the major issues: unemployment reform, tax reform. But I think hopefully this exercise that we've gone through over the summer really will bring everyone to the table, and hopefully we can negotiate better in good faith.
Somebody wants to keep up with what Associated Industries of Missouri is doing. The best way is what?
On our website, www.aimo.com.
All right, Ray McCarty from Associated Industries of Missouri, thank you so much for the time today.
Thank you, Mike.